welcome to Epiphytic Cacti. Today I want to talk a little bit about Sunburn. I don't know if we can see these two pots here, but this pot and this pot, both of these plants have branches that are actually going up out of the lattice. And because it's early spring, the tree that's above me doesn't really have its full leaves yet. And because they're just coming inside, I noticed that these had a little bit of sunburn. So I just kind of wanted to take a closer look at what sunburn looks like when it happens. Let's take a look at this guy first. Kind of want to come in here and look at this branch that was poking out of the top of the lattice. New growth is more susceptible to being sunburned. And I think that if you grow your plants indoors and then you bring them outside, if you don't actually acclimatize them enough, you will end up with sunburn. Last year, when I didn't run the grow lights and I moved the plants outdoors, I had a ton of sunburn. It was really bad and I was just not careful enough. This year, when I was running the grow lights and I moved the plants outside, I did not have that problem. I had little minor sunburn like this where, the branches were sticking way out of the lattice and the sun was really, really harsh. But it was definitely, the grow lights definitely had some impact on less sunburn. One of the things that happens a lot with Epi, which is really funny, is that a lot of your problems that will appear on the branches, they're orange. So it makes it a little difficult to discern between what's sunburn, what's chemical burn, what's fungus, because for whatever mysterious reason, a lot of issues that appear on Epiphyllum appear orange. So there's something about sunburn, though, that is just a little different. It's really hard to see, but the branches on Epiphyllum, they're very porous. And so what happens with sunburn is that because it's a burn just legitimately on the surface, on the very outer layers of the plant, you can actually still sort of see and feel that texture. It actually kind of brings out that texture a little bit more. Sometimes it will be ever so slightly sunk, but it's not a ton, you can definitely tell that it's sunburn when it's on the surface of the plant like this. It can appear orange, slightly silvery, like a silvery white color, and slightly yellow, but it all has the same kind of appearance like this, where it's just on the very surface of the branches. You can just tell it's on the surface of the branches. You can see that it's also very kind of even. One way that you can definitely tell is because the midrib here, because it is raised, it is actually going to catch the sun stronger than the rest of it. So you can see that the midrib here is incredibly orange down this one side. That's another way that you can kind of tell. It just has to do with the natural way that the sun is casting. And new growth is considerably more affected than old growth. All right, so here's the second sample. And you can see this guy too. He just had these branches just poking out of the lattice, getting just a little bit too much sun. And you can see it's the same sort of thing. I can sort of see that little bit of texture in there. I can see that it's just ever so slightly sunk, but I can also see that it's just purely on the surface and it's even. And what I mean by even is that it's not all splotchy and messed up. I'll show you a different sample that I'm pretty certain is some sort of fungus. And it's orange, but it's all splotchy and messed up, and it definitely doesn't look even like this. So it just caught the very tip of that branch, and then there's another branch here. There we go. Here's another one. It's pretty much brand new growth. This plant does seem to carry a lot of anthocyanin, which is just that purple reddish coloration. And you can see here that it's kind of like this funny tiger striping that's going on from this growing. And so you can actually see the purplish coloration with the anthocyanin. But here you can see again where it's got, that a little bit of orange. It's slightly silvery. I can actually feel a little bit of that texture that's on Epiphyllum branches when they get burned because their branches are porous. And once again, you can see it's fairly even. It's fairly even. It's on the edges here. This guy, this was his new growth last year, and he got moved outside, and you know, he got sunburn. He got sunburn up here, and then this whole entire branch on the backside just whoosh, got totally sunburned. And you can see what happens. It just heals over. It heals over, it's scarred, it turns white. And I don't know if I can get in there and get it to focus enough. I don't know if I can. But sometimes you can see, like, even in the scarring like this, you can actually see, like, right here, you can see the pores that I'm talking about a little bit. So it's interesting. And if you were to, I don't recommend doing this, I would just leave the scarring alone. But if you were to scratch this, what you will see, on old scarring like this, what you're to do is, if you were to scratch this off, what you will end up finding underneath is perfectly green tissue. So it's just a surface scar, just like the sunburn, just like us, really. When we get sunburn, it's just really on the surface of our skin, and then, you know, our skin sheds off and we're okay. So you can see it's still just totally green and totally fine under there. No, so nothing serious to worry about. You can see this guy put out these 2 bunny ears out of the top of his growth, and he put out this guy, and this is new growth. Actually, all 3 of these are, well, these 2 are more new, but, you know, it's new growth, so it's not like this plant is super suffering from that kind of thing. I don't know why I let them grow like this, I just do. Yeah, for people who are like, why is she letting it grow out of the end like that? I just do. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm going to show this guy too, just because I thought it was a little bit interesting. So here's a little bit more sunburn. You can see it right there, right on the new growth. And like I said, the new growth, it's definitely way more susceptible to this. So, you know, it's not like hardened like that. Like, you can see this older growth that's sitting right next to it seems to be completely unaffected by this. But then the younger growth definitely just got scorched right there. And once again, like, you can see that there are areas here that are a little bit like more sunken or whatever, but you can also see that the orange coloration is continuous. Epic, the European Society, they actually have a DVD that you can get from their website that has all of their old publications. And as I was reading these old publications, I came across something that I thought was really interesting, because sometimes it's human nature to really only see from your own personal perspective. And so, like, you use your own personal experiences. And I came across a term that was incredibly interesting. I came across this term, sun bleaching. And I've heard people who grow in much warmer climates than mine, who get to grow outdoors year round, call something that I never really considered to be like sunburn. You know, like, I've actually heard them talk about how, like, sunburn is yellow. And I think I'd have always been a little bit confused by that. But again, I don't grow outdoors year round. My plants come inside, they go outside. They come inside, they go outside. So, like, they're not exposed to long periods of sunlight. That is until I got the grow lights. And when I got the grow lights, there were some plants that I think were just, you know, I was inexperienced with the grow lights. I wasn't necessarily sure how close or how far they should be. And so what happened here is that, like, some of the plants, I'd put them very close to the grow lights, and then I started noticing interesting impacts that they were having from the prolonged exposure to the grow lights. And one of them is what I would actually call bleaching. And it looks like this, which is interesting because it's yellow. So I think that if you grow in a warmer climate and you can keep your epiphyllum outdoors year round and you keep them in high sunlight, you can get something that looks like this, which some people might actually refer to as sunburn. I like the term sun bleaching, particularly on this, because what it's done is essentially remove the color. I don't know this for sure, but I mean, I've kind of heard it a little bit that if you take the plant and you move it into less sunlight, that it will go back to green. The underside is perfectly green. This, right, I would call this sun bleaching. I wouldn't really call this sun burning, because it's not truly burnt the way that, like, some of the other plants are. So it was an interesting term, and I thought it was a really interesting way to differentiate between these two different issues. This poor guy just looks terrible. You can see here that there's like some weird spotting here. This is actually kind of some old issue that cropped up downstairs in the basement where it just suddenly like developed these weird little orange patches. But you can see that they are patches. It's not a continuous coloration, really. This got moved outside, and sure, it's getting more sunlight, but there's a couple of interesting things about this that are different from Sunburn. Is that one, it's patchy. So I can see that the coloration on here, it's patchy. It doesn't even really look like it's on the surface necessarily. It actually kind of looks like it's kind of like rotting and damaging the tissue here. The other thing that I think is telltale about this probably being some sort of fungus is that it is affecting both sides. So it's not just one side that's affected like it would be with Sunburn. Both sides of this are affected. And it's spreading very quickly. Another thing that like Sunburn, it like, yes, if you continuously leave it there, you know, like the sunburn will get bigger, but it doesn't just like jump from branch to branch like this and spread on every side of the branch kind of thing. So this is probably more of a fungal kind of issue. Yeah, so let's look at this guy too, because this is interesting. This guy too here, he's gotten a little bit of sunburn, just very light. It's nothing like super serious, but you know, he's got a little bit of sunburn here on his kind of newer growth. They're you know, also presenting just as like a little bit of orange. This is kind of how it can appear, where it's a little bit more yellow or a little bit more silvery looking. You know, so it's just a little bit of it. And here on the back side we can see, you know, a little more orange there. And then we see something like this. Right? And you can see that this is patchy and everything. But there's another thing that I think can happen here. Is I think that what can happen here is that when it rains and it gets like little droplets on it, the sun can actually hit this and basically seriously burn it. But this is also something that I look at and I scratch my head because I'm like, is it fungus? Or is it like Raindrop magnification sunburn? It's a mystery. I don't know. So with a plant like this, I'm pretty much just gonna keep an eye on it and be like, if it's spreading, if it doesn't just kind of like stop there and it continuously like spreads and gets worse, then I know that was not, you know, raindrop burn. So what I'm going to do here is actually run a little bit of a slideshow with various pictures of what I know to be sunburn and various pictures of what I know to be more fungal issues. And then I just kind of want to talk about a little bit about what I like to call plant Sherlocking. How I kind of try to diagnose some things is I look around at like what happened in the past week. So like with sunburn, yes, I moved the plants out maybe about a week and a half ago, and they've been indoors where they just have not had the same amount of light. So I moved them outdoors a week and a half later. When they're exposed to much stronger sunlight, they suddenly start getting sunburn. If they've been outside for 3 months and they suddenly start getting orangish discoloration on them, I'm not going to think that's sunburn. I'm going to immediately think that that is fungal. Why? Because nothing has changed with their sun exposure. So tricky thing is that I think that for some people, you know, like I said, my plants go in and out and in and out. But there's still a danger in some, you know, warmer climates where your epiphyllum are outdoors year round, which is basically when the sun changes its position in the sky, it can actually just become much stronger, you know, late winter into early spring. And then as it starts going on to summer, which can cause sunburn. I think that in the display of these pictures, what you're going to see is that some of them, sometimes they look so similar that it would be very difficult to pinpoint, you know. So sometimes I think you might just kind of have to sit back and watch it a little bit, you know, maybe quarantine it. Like if you suspect it's fungus, quarantine it, move it away from your plants a little bit. One thing that I would actually recommend is taking the plant and slowly moving it into more light, because, you know, your major things like fungus and bacteria and stuff like that, they don't grow in the sunlight. So I think that's really going to be kind of your best bet to get it to slow down, to halt, and then so you can figure out, what to do to treat it. Thank you for watching, and happy cacti growing.